What up, and greetings. Welcome to my first ever movie review. The reason why I decided to make a Warcraft beginning movie review is I'm a long-term fan. I've been playing the RTS games since Warcraft 1. Then I played World of Warcraft for a couple of years when it came out, and now I'm playing Hearthstone, which again is a Blizzard game. Blizzard is the company that makes Warcraft games, for anyone that didn't know that. And again, it's based on characters and lore, which is the history of the world. So I count myself as a fan. Don't take this review as a fanboy review because I hope that it's not. I'm gonna do my best to try to not make it that because I'm quite critical of movies, I hope. And I'm gonna try to look as objectively as I possibly can. First, I would like to say that this movie is not awful. It's got its mistakes, it's got its flaws, like any movie out there. But people that claim that it's just a crap movie and are giving it 2% or 10% to counterbalance the fanboyism that, some reviewers are doing are, unfaithful to reviewing properly because, I've seen a lot of bad movies and I don't believe that this is one of them. So, without further ado, let's get into reviewing. This is going to be a non spoiler review, so there's not going to be any plot twists or, crazy character developments, whatever that might mean, in a story that we already know. But yeah, I'm going to try to make it spoiler free. I'm going to put another review that is going to be with spoilers later on, hopefully tomorrow. And yeah, let's get into it. So for someone like me that's seen Warcraft history or Warcraft stories evolve from something that the developers really wrote on their lunch break into this massive story that is branching out, and there's books about it, and there's fan fiction about it, and there's different theories about it, and hour-long videos about characters' past lore. It's quite an amazing feat, to be honest. I think that this movie could have came out a couple of years ago when World of Warcraft was really at its height, because since having over 10 million subscribers, it's gone down to about 6 million. And if Blizzard is aiming for this movie to be a sort of attraction for new players, I'm not really sure that they went in the best path possible, because I think this movie is really only going to be appreciated by the fans that get all the nods in the movie. For people coming from outside, it's going to be slightly above average fantasy movie, which is not a bad thing. We have had a lot of really bad fantasy movies come out lately, so Hobbit. So this is definitely not one of the subpar ones. It could have been seen quite well in how people that I was with reacted to the movie, because I know a lot about the lore and about the characters, obviously, and I liked it quite a bit. My girlfriend that knows a tiny bit of information, she played Hearthstone, just for me. She enjoyed it a bit, and then I was there with another person that doesn't know anything about the lore, nothing about the history, and they didn't like it that much. So I think Blizzard went with the path of trying to please their long-term fans, and that's definitely not a bad thing, for me at least. If they wanted to go the other path to make it more accessible to everyone, fans might have hated it. And I'm glad that they didn't make it into this crazy opus that, again, I'm gonna mention Hobbit, that they made from Hobbit, and just drawn out nothingness of scenes. I think that, on the other hand, they sort of rush the story, try to stick too many characters in quite a short period of time, because the movie is just over 2 hours. So in case you don't have a lot of time and you just want to hear from this review whether to go and watch it or not watch it because you're undecided, I'm telling you, go watch it. If you like fantasy at all and you enjoy movies with magic and dragons and, epic battles, go and watch it, because this is definitely not one of the ones where you're gonna be like, this was just 2 hours of my lost time. I think that it's a decent movie, and again, I'm gonna talk about the flaws a bit more later on, But for people that are saying that this movie is 2 out of 100%, I have to say,
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
okay, I would like to talk about a couple of different aspects of the movie. Let's start on something a bit positive. Let's start on the CGI, the cinematography, and about how the movie looks. Because the movie looks amazing, okay? The movie is so close to the game and how the game feels that it's scary. They really translated that very well, in that the zones feel different. There's Elven Forest that is lush and green. There's Badlands that are dead and red and dusty. There is a Stormwind that is sort of Minas Tirith style. Proud City made out of white stone and gold and silver and metal. Karazhan, that is, we only see a tiny bit of Karazhan and Ironforge, but those cities also have their own magic about them. And on the other hand, there's a massive contrast in between how this looks, and we can see that the humans have lived in wealth or in peace for years now, whereas the orcs just have their warband that keeps rolling on, and they plunder and they just live in huts that are made out of wood and leather, and they've got spikes and teeth and tusks everywhere hanging around them, skulls. I really love. Okay, what I love is Black Hand's shoulder pads. They're like made out of two spines, and it looks like he's got a cloak made out of bones and cool stuff. Cool stuff, okay? The cinematography and how the shots are is really quite cool. There's a couple of really cool shots. I think there could be more of that, and I think that the overall pace was going slightly too fast, and it was slightly jumping from here to there a bit too much. They didn't keep, especially in a couple of places where they're jumping from different places and everything is action based. Sometimes it feels like the stuff is happening a lot faster in one place and a lot slower in the other place. But it's hard to explain without spoiling it for you guys. So that's all I'm going to say. The magic feels really amazing as well. It doesn't feel overpowered. Like in Warcraft universe, brute strength still sort of competes with the power of magic. Not ultimately, but here you can see that you have to channel, you have to incantate, and you can be interrupted. Like there's a scene in between Lothar and Khadgar where he just shuts him up and therefore preventing him to cast the spell. That's also really cool, and they made this division in between blue color and white or yellowish being good magic, and then green and red sort of being the evil magic, like we've seen in perhaps Star Wars, and how the lightsabers have got different colors, so we know who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. That's also quite apparent and quite distinguished in this movie, so it's good that, when the English are fighting the French, they just got different uniforms, and it's hard to orientate yourself in the battlefield as in who is who. Here is quite different because the orcs are almost twice as big as the humans, and their style is quite different. They've got war paint. The humans are uniformly dressed, and it's an awesome gap. I love that they kept this as well. I think that the CGI sort of gets progressively better in the movie. I think in the beginning there's a couple of scenes where the fighting just seemed stiff, like they're poking each other and like they haven't, added some guys that are actually moving rather than just, strolling around and then just. I know that the orcs are meant to be heavy, but it really gets better in the second half of the movie, and a lot of the characters get better in the second half of the movie. I think that the first 30 minutes of this movie is actually the weakest, not in terms of the visuals. So I'm going to get a bit more to it when I talk about the plot and stuff. Another thing that I would say is that it's easy for fans to distinguish in between who's Ogrim and who's Black Hand and who's Gul'dan and who's Durotan in the beginning. But for people that don't know it, they made it quite well with the division of green orcs being the evil ones possessed by Fel and under Gul'dan's influence, and the brown ones not being corrupted yet. But sometimes it gets confusing. I think that the CGI, the characters sort of are dark, and sometimes it can get a bit confusing in fight scenes as to who's who for people that don't know these characters and don't know that, Ogrim's got Doomhammer on his shoulder. That's Ogrim, and Durotan. You see him at the beginning, you know that he's essentially the only good orc in the house. And Gul'dan, like, the moment you see him, you know it's Gul'dan. But for some people, they're like, who's Gul'dan? Who's Blackhand? Why is Blackhand there? Because there's not like one antagonist. Okay, there is one antagonist, which is Gul'dan. But because the war chief is actually Blackhand and Gul'dan is sort of controlling Blackhand, it gets confusing for people. They don't know that, and it's not really explained. So, when there's a Makora, who's fighting who? Why, it's against Gul'dan, which Blackhand is. Anyways, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm not going to get too deep into it. All I'm saying is that they did their best. I think they did their best with distinguishing the characters by the visual style, but it is still confusing. It's still going to be confusing for people that don't know the lore, and they're going to be like, who's him? Is he bad or good? Then again, people that don't like fantasy and don't want to get into it, my mom still didn't know who's the bad and who's the good guys in the second movie of Lord of the Rings. There's always going to be people like that, so don't get me wrong. They did their best, but I think that it gets confusing at times. That's all I'm going to say. And the last thing that I would say is that the CGI overall looks really damn amazing, but sometimes it feels unnatural. I wish that they used more real props, and I know they went with the decision of not doing that because they wanted to keep it unified. Also, if they've got Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3 coming out, they don't want to change that over or realize that it's not actually possible. Second movie come along and they don't have the budget for it or whatever. But I think that the CGI scenes work in the scenes where it's got a background that's a real location, right? Even if it's built in a studio, because you've got real stones, there's something that is real in that scene. Whereas if it's real characters with CGI characters in the same scene and it's on a green screen and there's CGI background, which oftentimes, they have to blur digitally because it's not real lens giving you the perspective and the illusion of distance. They essentially have to make the illusion of distance, right? And sometimes it just feels like the blur isn't real and the background doesn't really fit with the front. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't work. There's only like 2 or 3 scenes where it's like, and it zooms. In the end, there's like a zoom over Stonewind, and it sort of blurs, and then it sharpens again, and you're like, what happened? But I think they're gonna iron this out in the next movies, and they're gonna learn from this, hopefully, because the CGI is definitely not subpar. It's not bad. I've seen some bad CGI. It has its own style and its own character. I don't think that it's just any fantasy movie. I think that the spells and what's happening in the movie, just the style of the light in the eyes, and it's got its own style. It's not, Dungeons and Dragons sort of just whatever goes thrown in there. And a lot of these fantasy movies just got really standard. It feels like standard templates for CGI, just cookie cutter, same shit, different day. Next thing I want to talk about the characters and how they developed and how they acted out. First thing I'm going to say, and it might be controversial, but my girlfriend said this, and I totally agree with the fact, so I'm not the only one saying this. The CGI characters, in most cases, have acted or played out better and were more believable than the human characters. And mainly Kinlane and Lothar's son were misplaced. I mean, I didn't care about these characters one bit. Before you're doing something with the character, whereas it's, killing him off or putting him in a threatening situation in order to make you feel like, you have to care for the character. And this hasn't happened. They haven't done anything with the character to make us care for them. Kinlane is it doesn't feel like a king. There's just one moment where he's decisive. Throughout the whole time, he just calls Medivh for help whenever he needs to. Lothar and Garona, I've actually only started liking 30 minutes into the movie. I think the transformation they did with Garona was really quick because she was meant to be this really badass assassin at the beginning and a slave, and she just talks about it essentially. She has a couple of fight scenes, but you cannot really see her fighting abilities shine, with her being just a badass. I think they nailed Medivh. Didn't like him again for the first 30 minutes of the movie, but then it kind of made sense, and they made sense why they changed that lore bit of their romance with Garona, because there just wasn't space for it in the movie. They've got the character development with Medivh that they're going for, and it wouldn't make sense because the story in the lore takes a number of years, whereas here it's just like everything happens, on a scale of 2 hours. They have to rush it, and at the same time, they tried putting slightly too much in, and there was a bit too much jumping here and there. They didn't get the scenes and the characters time to develop. There's a scene in the movie where they're sitting by the campfire, and Garona's like, "Oh yeah, my childhood was rough," and Khadgar's like, "Oh yeah, my childhood is rough," and Lothar's like, "Oh yeah, let's go to bed." It just, I know what it's meant to do, but it doesn't work in this way. Some of the scenes work brilliantly, and they are funny and hilarious. I think that there's actually a couple of good chuckle moments in there, and a couple of moments that are surprising or, make you go to the edge of your seat. But some of them feel forced. I wouldn't call them cringe, or, there was never a moment where I was just like, really? But a couple of moments were close. So the main flaw actually with this movie, I would say, is the acting, the characters, and the script itself. Because the story is what makes a movie, right? We can all agree on that. CGI is all good, but look at Avatar, look at Final Fantasy. Like, those movies are not great because the story is not great. And when the story is great, everything else will follow. Yeah, that's what I think. And that's what I think that they should have taken it back a step and just not, dwell on the CGI and making it all perfectly acceptable in the Book of Warcraft fans, and made it a bit more of a movie that's character driven and where you care about the characters. Just take out 2 or 3 characters that are not that important to give more room to the other characters to develop. I think that would be fine. I really liked some of the nods that they made in the movie, be it, the Murloc in the river, just them traveling and that's something that's really cool, and I'm sure that fans will appreciate. And the people that don't know the games wouldn't know what the hell is going on about. And that's the thing. For people that are going there with their boyfriends that are playing World of Warcraft and they didn't hear anything about the backstory of the world, I think they could have made it easier for them to get into it and helped themselves with the second movie and third movie and, box office records, because they need 180 million to come back. They spent quite a bit of money on this movie, and so far it looks like they might be getting it back, but we have to see as to how the reviews are. And word to mouth is the most important thing, so go and see this movie and tell your friends to go and see it, because hopefully that way second and third movie is going to be better than this movie, which is definitely not bad, but it can be better. Another thing that I don't think they thought through properly was the languages, because orcs speak a different language to the humans, and at the beginning they're sort of speaking the common tongue that the humans are speaking as well. Then 10 minutes into it, suddenly the orcs speak a different language. Garuna understands both, so then she starts translating. Then it goes back into them speaking the same language. I think they should have done one or the other, or just make the transition right at the beginning of the movie rather than 10 minutes in, because it just felt unnatural. And I know that it's convenience for them, and it makes sense when you think about it, but it just didn't work for people that don't bother think about these things until it hits them and they're like, huh? So yeah, when you have a WTF moment, 10 minutes into the movie, it's not the best sign. But then again, if they made it with subtitles throughout the entire movie, the acting might have not, or the acting, the CGI orc acting wouldn't come through that well. And I think that it's actually one of the best parts of the movie. I think that Ogrim and Duroton and Black Hand and Gul'dan are all great. Like, Gul'dan is such a badass guy. He's just a leader. Like, from his voice, you understand why the orcs follow him. The orcs just follow the biggest badass around, and Gul'dan is, at the moment, the biggest badass around. And last thing I'm going to mention with the storyline is that I didn't really like the ending, the way that they're trying to tie it into movie number 2. There was plenty of space to try to tie it. And before the last 3 minutes of the movie, it kind of feels forced when everything that is sort of connecting it to the next episode happens in the last 3 minutes or the last 5 minutes of the movie. And it just doesn't feel natural. It feels forced. When things feel forced, they don't flow that well. And you struggle to believe it. And I did struggle to believe the ending. Okay, so now that we went through some of the negatives, actually most of the negatives, my biggest gripes are with the script. Duncan Jones, Chris Metzen. Let's talk about something a bit more positive. Let's make a nice sandwich out of it. So the music. Music is by Ramin Djawadi. He also composed soundtracks for Iron Man. He does music for Game of Thrones. So he's no newbie, and the music is amazing. It's very seamless. You don't realize that you're hearing music in scenes, which usually means that it depicts the scene very, very well. It's very dynamic. There's a fight scene that you can see in the trailer when the humans are getting ambushed by the orc horde or by a small guerrilla band of orcs. And the music skips from the horde sort of themes to alliance themes whenever you see horde or alliance person fighting or in the forefront of the shot, and it works, and the whole scene and the music just flows, and really cool. The volume, the levels are great. It's not overpowering the dialogue, even though I think that the mixing, especially with the orcs, because the orcs are like, I am the war chief, because they mumble slightly like me. They could raise their volume slightly, I think, because some of the scenes it's quite hard, and I was almost in an empty screen to understand what's saying. So in a screen where everyone's eating popcorn, that might be even harder, but maybe just the level in the cinema was lower than some other people have it. I'm not sure. But yeah, the slight mumbling issue, which I know that it's to sort of do with the timbre and the tone of the voice. But overall, the mix of the music and the dialogue is very well done. I hated something like Interstellar. I know that it's Nolan style, but I don't care. It's just loud music, loud folly, and loud voices at the same time. It doesn't work, yeah? Give stuff room, okay? Don't strain my ears. Otherwise, I'm not gonna go to cinema at all, right? Yeah, I think the music worked really well. I'm happy with the way that it is. I think that Blizzard just doesn't really make poor choices when it comes to music, right? The music in their games and overall, which they present in their trailers and their little videos that is accompanying, now Overwatch release or Hearthstone releases, or the trailers for expansions. Like, it's all top-notch quality stuff, yeah? So Blizzard is doing good on that. And that's it for my Warcraft movie review. I know that I didn't cover everything, but I'm gonna leave a lot of the stuff for my spoiler review. I hope that this has given you an idea about how the movie is. I'm just telling you again that it's not a bad movie. It's definitely no 10% on IMDb sort of movie. So if you have any inclination to go and watch it, please do. I do recommend you to. And I do sincerely hope that number 2 and 3 are coming. and they're gonna improve on the formula and make it even more awesome in the future. So that being said, guys, have a beautiful week, and until I speak to you next time, bye. Take care. And also, I forgot to say, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and comment on this video to make it higher in the searches. Thanks.